Our video begins in London, inside a government car with Julia Montague, the Home Secretary, and her principal bodyguard David Budd. By the time we meet them, they're in the middle of a conversation. David Budd isn't just any bodyguard. He served 2 tours with the Royal Albion Regiment in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, in active combat during the Afghanistan War. Suddenly, a shot rings out and takes out the driver immediately. In an instant, their routine journey becomes a life-or-death situation. His training kicks in as he ducks down to stay below the window line, sharply ordering Julia to do the same as shots continue to ring out against the armored vehicle. David relays the situation to his comrades via radio. As the sniper continues to fire, David holds Julia's hand to calm her down, assuring her that the bullets can't penetrate the armored plating. But David isn't content to just wait for rescue. He makes a bold decision and gets out of the car. Using his phone camera like a makeshift periscope, he manages to locate the sniper positioned high up on the roof of a building across the street. When David relays this critical information to control, he's told that backup will arrive in 2 minutes. David decides to take matters into his own hands. He removes the fallen driver and takes the wheel himself. Even as shots continue to ring out around them, he maneuvers the vehicle to take Julia out of the sniper's direct line of sight. His military driving training is on full display here. When he finally reaches a blind spot, he gets out of the vehicle and enters the building, announcing that he's an armed police officer in need of access to the roof. The building's security escorts him up. Upon reaching the roof, David finally comes face to face with the sniper, only to realize, as the killer descends the stairs, that it's his former comrade from the war in Afghanistan. Shocked and unable to react, David is confronted by the assassin, who insists that the job must be completed. The man explains that Julia is a dangerous politician who must be stopped. In the end, the assassin ends it. David looks down from the roof and sees as Julia is being led by security team and ambulance service to safety. But you may be wondering, how did we get here? 2 weeks ago, David Budd wakes up on a train with his children, Charlie and Ella. He notices a suspicious man discarding his phone and later learns from the train's guard that there may be a bomb on board. Leaving his kids with a passenger, David prepares to act. After obtaining the guard's number, he contacts her and plans to throw the man off the train as he is emerging from the toilet. However, when the man emerges, David realizes he isn't carrying a bomb. When David pushes open the toilet door, he discovers a woman with explosives fastened to her body. He attempts to calm her through conversation. Tears stream down her face as she starts crying. David informs Sandra about the situation and urges her to prevent the police from rushing onto the train. The other passengers in the carriage are evacuated to a secure area. David shares his name with the woman, who reveals she is called Nadia. She discloses that the man from before was her spouse. David promises to shield Nadia from her husband and mentions his own children to her. The police outside consent to hold off on any action. Nadia grows anxious, and David calms her by sharing his experiences in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, her husband is arrested. As officers approach, urging David to step back, he refuses. A sniper targets the bathroom, but David shields Nadia, ensuring she stays inside. The explosives team arrives, and bomb disposal expert Karen works with Nadia to remove the explosive belt. Once disarmed, David and Nadia exit the train together. She watches as her husband is taken away, and David reassures her before she is taken into custody. Later, police escort David and his children home. The following day, David discovers that, because of his heroic actions on the train, he has been appointed as the principal bodyguard to Julia, the Home Secretary. The following day, David meets with Julia. He wants to speak with her about using the underground entrance. Julia doesn't seem interested. He learns that Julia likes to be seen. David observes everything from a distance. He rides with Julia that night as she conducts business on the phone. When Julia arrives home, David escorts her inside and proceeds to search the room. Julia objects to him searching her study, but he does it anyway. Their argument continues, and during this exchange, Julia discovers that David was the one who prevented the train terror attack. This revelation causes her to reconsider her view of him, and she changes her tone. The next day, Julia prepares for a radio interview, but her aide accidentally spills coffee on her. David offers her his shirt, assuring her it will fit. The interview begins, and David watches closely as Julia discusses her plans. She faces accusations of attempting to monitor phone calls, emails, and social media without judicial oversight. That night, David watches the interview repeatedly, clearly unimpressed by Julia's responses. The following day, David is urgently called upstairs and ordered to remove Dyson, who is causing a scene in the office after being fired. David successfully calms Chanel down and escorts her downstairs. She vents about being fired without proper acknowledgement of her efforts. Once downstairs, David notices that she is picked up in a luxury car, which surprises him since he had expected a cab. Later, David attends a meeting with the Veterans Peace Group, where he listens to Andy Absted discuss military action abroad. Luke is also present. During the meeting, Andy openly criticizes Julia. Afterward, David talks to Andy about life and PTSD, and Andy encourages him to attend counseling sessions. Andy expresses his disapproval of David's new career path. In the present, after the sniper attack, David receives a call from Julia and meets her at the hotel where she's staying for safety. She expresses frustration about not being able to return home after the sniper attack. David reassures her, but she questions why police were held back during the sniper attack, leaving them exposed. He explains that only the SO-15 executive officer could give that order. When Julia breaks down, David hesitates to comfort her, but she reminds him she's not royalty and allows him to touch her. They hug, and they eventually discuss Uganda. David is interrogated by DCI Sharma and DS Rayburn about Julia's attack, but provides little information. The detectives reveal they haven't identified the shooter or traced the firearm and question why the attacker spared David, a supposed stranger. David remains composed, and the interview ends. Back at the hotel, David eavesdrops on Julia's conversation with a security agent, who hands her a tablet for exchanging information. Confronting the man outside, David learns his name, Richard Longcross, before he calmly walks away. Julia reviews the evidence, discovering mentions of a serious sexual assault. Later, Sharma briefs his team on the shooter, revealing CCTV footage of him preparing the attack and tracking Julia's movements in advance. Meanwhile, David searches for information on Longcross but finds nothing. That night, David Budd returns to his room with a storm brewing in his eyes. The man looks wrecked. Looking frustrated, he begins to drink. Then, a knock at the door. Julia had ghosted him just the night before, so this was unexpected. But David seems uninterested. She tries to smooth things over, softening the air between them. Her voice lowers, her words careful but suggestive. She wants him back, not just as her protection detail, but something more intimate. Julia does her best to entice David, sending a clear invite his way. He takes the bait, and they discuss Uganda. At night, he secretly rummages through Julia's belongings and finds the tablet, uncovering serious allegations against politicians. In the morning, Rob hands Tahir a briefcase, including the speech that Julia is preparing to deliver in support of the bill. During the journey, with protesters on streets, Julia works on her speech. Upon arrival, she is welcomed by staff and speaks with Tahir, urging him to complete the final fact checks quickly. David observes as Julia begins her speech, but protesters disrupt the event and are escorted out. Noticing something unusual outside, David steps out and encounters Tahir, who insists there has been a major mistake with the speech. David asks to inspect his briefcase, and upon checking inside, he seems satisfied and lets him go. As Julia continues her speech, Tahir approaches the stage, triggering a bomb explosion. David and another bodyguard are injured while trying to intervene. Regaining consciousness, David checks on others before making his way to Julia. Later, he watches a news report about the attack and discusses the incident with Vicky, his wife. After the explosion, Sharma and his partner question David about leaving the auditorium before the explosion. He explains he saw someone acting suspiciously, but after checking it was Tahir, trying to deliver information to Julia, and that he checked the briefcase, which only contained documents. Shown CCTV footage, Sharma accuses David of being involved in the attacks on Julia. Louise shifts the focus to David's electronic devices, questioning why he turned off his phone. He claims it was to save battery and avoid distractions. Asked why he left the hospital, he insists he wanted privacy. Eventually, he is allowed to leave and spends the night with Vicky and their children. The next day, David visits the hospital and learns Julia has died, with the news quickly spreading. Later, The police finally identify the sniper, revealing a picture of Andrew Absted to David. He denies knowing him. Meanwhile, Chanel, recently fired by Julia, runs into David. She expresses regret over Julia's death and apologizes for the scene she caused when she was dismissed. David agrees to have a drink with her sometime, and they exchange numbers. As Chanel leaves, David notices her getting into a car with Luke Aikens and discreetly snaps a picture. David informs Louise about the vehicle, which is registered to a company in the Cayman Islands. He suspects a significant amount of money was involved in Julia's murder. They discuss Luke's ties to organized crime and question why Chanel would be reaching out to David. That night, David secretly enters Julia's apartment. He takes a framed photo, removes the backing, and discovers the tablet Longcross had given Julia, containing incriminating evidence against the Prime Minister. Later, David meets with Chanel, who quickly notices his gun. When he asks her about the source of her money, she seems uninterested in discussing business. Instead, they share a drink and continue their conversation until Luke and his men arrive. Luke is already aware of the gun and David's connection to Andy Absted. He points out that what matters is what the gun is loaded with. David is then punched and dragged outside. Meanwhile, Louise investigates Luke and Anne, uncovering their link to Andrew Absted. Absted has ties to David Budd, having served alongside him in Helmand, Afghanistan. Louise informs Sharma of this connection, along with evidence that David returned to Julia's house and broke in. They begin to suspect that David has been deceiving them all along and may be involved in Julia's murder. Without hesitation, they launch a manhunt for him. The scene shifts to a bloody David waking up in what appears to be a cellar. He discovers he is wearing a bomb vest with no apparent way to remove it. Slowly, he gets up, covers himself, and makes his way outside. Meanwhile, out on the streets, David manages to convince a woman to call the police for him. He identifies himself, but after her conversation with the authorities, her demeanor changes. David realizes he is now a suspect. As detectives rush to his location, he hides while police arrive. Lorraine Craddock believes she can persuade him to cooperate. When David spots Vicky with Louise, he steps forward, raises his hands, and reveals the bomb vest. He warns them that it is equipped with a dead man's switch. David desperately tries to convince them of his innocence. He is ordered to move away from the buildings to a more secluded location where they can neutralize him. Complying with their instructions, he is escorted to Pope Square. Stephen checks in on the situation, while Louise and Lorraine insist on speaking with him. Louise hands him a radio. To help persuade David, Vicky is brought to the scene, and he explains that he cannot remove the vest. When questioned about his connection to Andy, which he had initially tried to conceal, David is forced to address it. He urges Vicky to leave for her safety. Meanwhile, an officer is authorized to take a critical shot, but before they can act, Sharma arrives. Sharma engages with David, who reveals that the bomb is identical to Nadia's and recounts the events of the previous night. He discloses that Luke supplied Andy's rifle. Vicky backs up David's claims, confirming that he is telling the truth. David pleads for them to remove the bomb. An officer is finally cleared to approach. Bomb disposal expert Daniel Chung takes over, and David cooperates fully. Everyone watches anxiously as Chung examines the bomb, discussing its complexities with his team before stepping away, and arrives at the scene. She wants him taken out. Realizing this, Vicky runs toward David, assuring him that she believes in his innocence and wants to give him a chance to prove it. David then begins leading them toward his flat, where the crucial evidence is hidden. Upon arrival, Vicky is instructed to go inside and retrieve a rope and a spade. She returns with both, then climbs down into a cemetery and starts digging. Eventually, she uncovers a black plastic bag. David reveals that it contains the original tablet with the compromat, evidence that will expose both organized crime and the security services' involvement. Chung provides David with the necessary tools to defuse the bomb, while Vicky hands the tablet over to Sharma. Chung carefully guides David through defusing the bomb while Vicky is escorted away. David successfully frees his thumb from the trigger, but Chung warns him there may be hidden tripwires. He advises that a shunt would be the safest method. Following Chung's instructions, David secures the shunt and starts disconnecting the power supply. He cuts the first wire, taping the ends. As he prepares to cut the second wire, everyone steps back. The moment the wire is severed, David bolts, leaping over the edge. When Sharma goes after him, he finds only the discarded vest. David is gone. Later, when Chanel arrives home, she finds David waiting for her. He pressures her to cooperate and secure immunity, instructing her to set up a meeting with Luke. Watching from a distance, David tails Luke as he leaves in a vehicle. When the car stops, Chanel is ordered to wait outside. Seizing the moment, David moves in and observes as Luke meets with Craddock, the police chief. Luke is visibly frustrated that David is still alive. David steps forward, armed and ready, threatening both men. Under pressure, Luke complies with David's demands and admits that Julia's murder was beneficial to his organized crime operations. Chanel and Lorraine plead with David not to pull the trigger. He ultimately decides against it, telling them to call the police before he changes his mind. At the station, they watch Lorraine's interview. She confesses to leaking sensitive information, revealing that Luke had recruited and armed Absted. She admits to providing security plans and details about Julia's speech, which allowed Luke to bypass all security measures. Luke saw Julia as a threat to his business interests. Lorraine also confesses that she specifically assigned Bud to Julia because he was the perfect scapegoat. Despite the revelations, David suspects that an even deeper conspiracy remains. Several days later, David watches as Nadia is interviewed. However, Nadia coldly replies that David made the same mistake, trusting her. She admits that after David showed her pictures of his kids, she memorized the details and helped her organization orchestrate the school attack from behind bars. She further confesses to constructing the bomb vest and all of the explosives. She makes it clear that she is not a helpless, oppressed woman but a skilled operative who manipulated them all. She also reveals that she lied about Longcross. Sharma acknowledges that they had all been deceived. Nadia confirms that Luke planted the bomb that killed Julia. When asked why she didn't use her own explosives for that attack, she simply states that she has since corrected that mistake.